Hello.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm from Ukraine, I guess. I report all the news from Russian Ukrainian sources on Twitter. I've been doing it for some time.
Hold on. You'll have to speak up. You're modulating your volume significantly. Horesmi is a member of the community who has tenaciously survived thus far the invasion of Ukraine, because that is where he lives. And since I follow you on Twitter, I've been getting updates on your train passages to and from different cities, air raid sirens, amusing anecdotes about your grandma. Uh, what have you been up to?
yeah. I at the beginning of the invasion, I've been up to like denying that it's going to happen, as like a lot of people did. I actually got very mad at you because you've been pushing this that I thought was a narrative about an upcoming invasion that I thought was very unlikely. That was unwise of me. Um, Apparently, because of that, I didn't like prepare my foreign passport and stuff like that, and I couldn't get out in time. And now all males of drafting age are banned from leaving Ukraine, so I'm stuck here.
I tried to warn you, Horesmi. I gave you the tools to escape.
Yes, well, I mean, to be honest, you're just Vaush, and like there were a lot of more credible sources that that seem to believe otherwise. But
Evidently not. But yeah, no, I get you. I forgive you for your lack of faith. I'm glad you're okay for now.
well, yeah. Anyway, that is mostly because Ukraine is okay. Because well, I did not expect like to still be in Ukraine for this long. I expected to be in Russia, to be honest, by this time.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I
and
mean, you obviously, we've been covering the war in Ukraine somewhat reliably for a time now, and obviously Ukraine has been doing better than expected. But honest to God, in terms of the broader logistical efforts with the war, um, I feel we're well covered. I want to know what's happening to you. I mean, tell me, like all of it, from the beginning of the invasion. What have you done? What's been told? What's the mood been? The attitude? We know the news coming out of Ukraine, but not so much the personal experiences.
yeah, sure. So in the beginning, when when it was pretty clear that the invasion was going to happen, uh, well, the first thing we did, we went to like buy all the groceries because well, the siege was coming. And we were pretty successful the day before the war. We bought a bunch of stuff because well, it wasn't really the war yet, and nobody really. There wasn't the meme yet. The meme came later about the groceries. Then, like the first day of the war, fuck, we slept through all the sirens.
Well, where were
We
you? What
just.
city were you in?
I'm in Kiev. I was in Kiev, and then I went for a month. I'll tell about it later to Western Ukraine, and then I came back. Um, at the beginning in Kiev, there was just everyone was just kind of shocked and didn't realize what to do or how to act. And we used that moment to buy even more groceries, which was very relevant, as we found out later. Uh, just bought up a bunch of bread, put it in the fridge and stuff like that, just to prepare for like for food shortages,
Mm-hmm.
which came later. Um, in the beginning, we weren't. We probably should have evacuated in the first days. However, we were afraid. Like we weren't sure where the Russian forces were. We were expecting them to be like in Lviv by the third day or something like that. So, like something that would have sucked is to like come out of Kiev and just get stuck between like the front line while you were going. So we decided to stay for a few days. Um, and well, that was an interesting experience. So the thing that really sucked in the beginning is there wasn't really a good mechanism about notifying for air raids. We're supposed to have an air raid siren here, but it's really far away and it didn't work apparently at the start. Also, before the war, we had trouble finding a shelter because, well, our government, as usual, they prepared a pretty map on the internet about where all the shelters are, and then I went to find them. I went all over like for miles. I was going around to like schools and like many places, and they just were like, oh, we didn't know we had a bomb shelter. Um, that was very dumb. But apparently, we had a bomb shelter in our house. We just asked our like
So to be more
person
specific,
responsible.
it's not surprising to me that the infrastructure would have been non-functional and kind of jumbled and inaccessible. You know, I don't think any country is really prepared to be invaded. But I want to know, what were people talking about? I mean, I'm sure the people of Ukraine, at least a lot of them, have a healthy understanding of what Russian occupation could mean in an abstract sense. I mean, how much, like, I guess what I'm asking is, on a scale from people weathering it and saying, like, it'll be over soon, and people, like, getting into suicide cults because they don't want to be raped by marauding gangs of Russian soldiers. Like, what were the attitudes that you encountered from the people that you spoke to?
Well, a very annoying attitude that I've encountered is supporting the Russian invasion. I know like at least a few people.
In
Uh,
Kiev?
uh, yeah, well, they are from Donbass, so like tracks.
Hmm.
I know why they came to Kiev, not like Moscow or something, but I mean they are here. Um, and on the whole, like it was just mostly just in the beginning, it was mostly just shock and just nobody really knew what this meant. So like everyone was just kind of like like fight or flight or freeze. Everyone was just frozen because like what hell is going to happen? Nobody knew. Nobody understood what Russian occupation actually meant. Because in the beginning, like if you remember, there was like I think about Russia that they tried to like be nice and like have little casualties that didn't work out, and then they stopped doing it after like a few days. Um, so later on, they because Ukrainian media was very effective and maintained their control over like most of Ukraine, people just started to be mad at Russia and oh well uh, we had like a few psychologists on the state radio that kind of like helped maintain overall mood in the mostly correct direction. So a lot of
Wait,
people were mostly
elaborate on
fine.
that. You keep going over very interesting stuff very quickly. Okay, I understand you're currently in a war torn hellhole. I live in the U.S. You know, I'm invulnerable. A team of psychiatrists on the radio to. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so, well, the radio hired a few psychiatrists to sort of keep, well, they tracked overall mood across the nation and they gave advice on how to, how to act during panic attacks, how to maintain your mood. So, for example, and they gave advice how to ground yourself when you aren't sure what's going on and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't remember most of their advice, but that's just something that they regularly gave updates to people.
That's
So
genuinely
something.
really interesting, you know? Because that makes sense, right? It seems like the kind of thing that like a modern liberal democracy would do. Normally, when countries are invaded, they aren't countries that have the kind of infrastructure and national priorities to go like, okay, well, let's get some psychiatrists, you know, on the national broadcast so we can help people through this, like in an emotional sense. I mean, that's good. It's very useful. It's just interesting. Um, yeah, I wouldn't expect you to remember like everything they said or whatever, but it's still, I guess, pretty cool and
Well,
reasonable that that would be there.
the caveat is that the psychiatrist was fine, right, but his advice wasn't really. He didn't like go into it
I didn't
often.
understand a word of that. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. The nuance is that the psychiatrist on the radio was far right, so like, but yeah, he didn't really go into his ideology too far.
How do you in what way how do you know that he was far right? Did he say anything far right, or was it
Oh
just
no,
like a known
he's
personality?
like a blogger. He has YouTube videos and stuff like that. So, for example, he was mad about the 8th of May, which is like a Women's Day. Well, because he hates women and because it was, in his word, it was a socialist holiday, and he hates socialists. And also, he's mad that Ukraine doesn't spend enough money on spends too much money on welfare, stuff like that. But I mean,
Gotcha.
it was his personal opinions. He didn't really speak on them on the radio.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting that they would get that gig though, you know?
I mean, yeah. I mean, this government was Zelensky's government was interesting in the way that they tried to like fight corruption by bringing a bunch of like Zoomers into the government,
Hmm.
which in terms of corruption didn't really work, but it did work in like making people very very in tune with like the vibes on the internet. So, like for example, we had like they hired a bunch of streamers and bloggers to cover the war all the time, and like there was a really funny moment recently where you have like your usual propaganda war coverage, and like the main guy on the show starts talking about how Russians are doing a Zerg rush, and then some guy awkwardly asks what the fuck is that, and then everyone realizes that well, the country is composed mostly of 6-year-old grandmas, and you have to explain what the hell a video game is and stuff like that, and
That
it
is
was pretty
really
awkward.
that is so strange. The idea of people in government not relating to their people because they're too young. That is a really interesting thing. Because of course, here in the United States, everyone in Congress is 90 years old. Um, so we have the opposite problem over here. The idea of a generational divide in favor of those in government being younger is really weird. But I guess that makes sense. With so you say that there are people in Kiev who are from the Donbass who were initially supportive of the Russian invasion. Were they targeted in any way? Because I imagine that a lot of Ukrainians would just see them as traitors. Like, did they faced social persecution? Have there been people getting like beat up in the streets because they have been vocally supportive of the invasion?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm not saying who they are because like if I say they will get targeted by the Secret Service, so they will
Gotcha,
arrive at
gotcha,
the door and
gotcha.
ask questions. But for the most part, like they just arrive and like ask questions and ask to like change your opinion, and like the implication that like a bunch of guys with a case came to you usually works.
Gotcha. Do they come across as paid shills to you?
No, not really. They're not really rich. No, no.
Gotcha.
But sometimes there are I mean there are foreign agents that act like they usually aren't really like paid shields. They are just spies. So like they have training, they have gear and stuff like that. But I mean it does happen.
It's just interesting to think, just the motivations there. Normally, when people in a country being invaded are supportive of the invaders, I mean, they're essentially treated as traitors. And yeah, I mean, like you said, they get disappeared. It would not at all be unsurprising for that to take place here as well. I struggle to imagine the motivations. The people who come from the Donbass, I mean, we've talked about this a bit on stream, but they just, I imagine a lot of the support is they just think that Russia has a right to liberate the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics.
It's very easy to explain really because like in the modern world it's very easy to create an information environment that is very isolating and that is tailored to well to reinforce what you already think. And so, like, they watch like pro-Russian media sources, and they never stopped it. And so, of course, their opinion isn't going to change.
Gotcha. There probably aren't going to be very many pro-Russian media sources left in Ukraine after all this is done. Obviously, all the pro-Russian parties have been suspended. Pro-Russian media broadcasts have been like censored by the government. Um, it seems like this is the sun is setting a little bit on the ability to be in any way vocally pro-Russian in Ukraine.
Well, to a degree, on the internet, it's impossible to really do anything about. So like they can ban like the radio and the TV stations, but I mean, there was a Russian TV channel, for example. They can just continue on the internet, and like yeah, a lot of people are going to stop watching them on TV, but those who know them will just continue. And the internet is impossible to ban. Like recently, Russia tried to cut Ukrainian internet in the Kherson region, and for some reason it didn't work. So like it continues to work. Recently, I saw like a statement from the Ukrainian internet services. They said like we don't even know where all the cables are. That we would even we wouldn't know how to cut them. So obviously Russians can't, because it's like every single internet company lay down their own cable, and they don't specify the location, and so in the end it's just impossible to really stop for
That
both
makes
sides.
sense. It seems like kind of a futile effort as well. The idea of, like at that point there have to be diminishing returns on cracking down on this.
Yeah, like for example, Russia banned Facebook. Like the amount of users didn't really drop down, as far as I know. So there
With
is that.
regards to you, how old are you again?
I'm 23.
Have you been receiving any pressure at all to join with the Ukrainian Defense Forces?
Depends on where you are. So I mean, obviously, like there is like total mobilization. You have to arrive at the draft office, and like they have to decide what to do with you. But I mean, they have to. It's complicated. So before the war, I wisely went to the draft office to do all the medical exams and decide my fate.
Mhm.
And they decided that I'm ineligible for draft in the peacetime. However, during wartime, I technically I can be drafted, but they don't really want me, at least in Kiev, as far as I know. I didn't really ask, but from like my friends who went there and seen the vibe there, that they aren't really in Kiev. They aren't really looking for people because they have enough. In the West, the situation is very different. So in the West, there are a lot of draft offices that are just how they're crazy. Let's just say it like that. I've seen reports that one-legged people get drafted like crazy, insane shit. Um, and even like recently, the government reported on it and said they are cracking down on it. But for some reason, in a lot of Western regions, well, essentially they are just looking to catch a bunch of refugees to draft them. We don't know why they are doing it. Some speculate that they want to fill up their quotas with the refugees so that locals don't get drafted. Some speculate that I don't know why it's happening, but in Kiev it's fine.
Gotcha.
Um,
Well, I'm happy to hear that at least. You wouldn't be able to keep us informed on Twitter if you were drafted.
Actually, I would be,
Huh.
because the soldiers kind of have to like post updates too. Recently, actually, I've seen like a report that United States conducted a military exercise in California to, as they said, to train according to Ukrainian standards, which is, I mean, okay, thank you. Um, and so one of the things they decided to train was in the use of social media, because well, in the modern war, soldiers kind of have to like be on Twitter and post things, and well, in general, they have to like be trained how to use Twitter properly. So, for example, how to not get clipped out of context, which is important for an army. How to how to counter the enemy misinformation. So like something they did was like they were simulating attacking a city, and the enemy was trying to convince everyone that the city didn't exist or something. Well, it didn't exist and they deserved it or something like that. And
It's genuinely really interesting to think about, and it absolutely makes sense, you know? Because it used to be that all this information could only be relayed through wartime journalists. But nowadays, with social media, it's possible for people on either side of a conflict to non-stop share their side of the story. And you don't want to get buried out in enemy propaganda by like not ever posting anything yourself. So you would want your soldiers to be fairly active in that respect. That makes a lot of sense. It's just very funny to think about.
Well, it's twofold because the soldiers have to be very active and also must not post dumb shit, which is very easy on Twitter.
Mhm.
Because well, obviously, then you're just an easy target for enemy propaganda. Which you have to train soldiers especially for that. And from what I've heard, the United States weren't very impressed with the results. So like the soldiers and the officers were just not well. The vibe was that like, why the fuck do I have to like bother with Twitter while I'm getting shot, which is an understandable reaction, but it's wrong. So like Ukrainians apparently trained for that, and well, what I was saying is that even if I was drafted, I would be posting even more on Twitter.
So
So
noted. And very responsibly as well, in line with the guidance and instruction of the Ukrainian Defense Forces Twitter lessons. I get that, though. I mean, it's literally like a good optics argument, right? Like, because one of the things that keeps fucking up Russia in the PR game is that their soldiers are basically like barbarians. So every time Russian soldiers have been in a place, like, you get all these stories of like rape, mass murder, like mass graves and shit. And Russians sometimes will literally just like take pictures of this shit to brag, which makes it really difficult for the Russian government to continue to pretend that they're just there as part of like a special military exercise. Avoiding that pretty important.
yeah, there was like a pretty horrific incident recently where like a Russian soldier raped an infant and posted on social media. As far as I know, he was jailed by Russia because well, at some point you can't get away with it.
Yeah, even by
Uh,
their standards, that's pretty. Yeah, even even for the Russian military, past a point, the commanders have to be like, okay, all right, you were given leeway, but not half that much. Jesus. Um,
Yeah, essentially, like the vibe from the Russian commanders, as far as they know, like it's okay to do it if nobody finds out. But if someone finds out, they will come after you. So like I know, like there was a some Russian soldiers like did a bunch of war crimes, and apparently the Ukrainian secret services tapped his phone, which happens often because Russians steal Ukrainian phones, but they're of course easy to tap by Ukrainian secret service. And so, well, that's how they find out where all the generals are. But on the other side, they find out what he did and who he was, basically doxed him, and now he faces jail in Russia because, well, they kind of have to take care of it.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, very, very much it's okay if no one finds out kind of attitude, which I think historically has actually been the norm for a lot of this kind of behavior, you know? Like back in the medieval period, armies, when they traveled through the countryside, would rape and pillage all the time. That was the norm. They would do it to their own kingdom as well, like they don't, it's not like they would only do that when they reached like, enemy, like village tax areas or whatever. So,
They didn't know the difference, to be honest. Like everyone spoke mostly the same, like
yeah,
dialects and stuff.
there
Yeah.
weren't borders back then, so it wasn't like, oh, we've crossed the border, now everything's fair game. Everything, like the lines that you see in a medieval map are basically just dictated by who was taxed by who. But
Yeah,
there,
and also for a feudal lord, of course, everything beyond his personal borders was completely foreign land to him, and his personal borders were like a town. I don't know.
which means effectively that most armies, most of the time, were in territory that they did, yeah, like which they considered to be antagonistic. Um, but even back then, like, there were like implicit rules of conduct where it's like, okay, we know you're going to steal and rape, but like you can't do it in the capital city. Like you have to limit it in these ways, like that kind of stuff. Um, and it's getting harder and harder to get away with this stuff now with social media. So learning how to play that game, to be the least rapey army, I guess, is
Yay!
pretty yeah, it's pretty important, I'd say.
Yeah, there was like recently like a big of well propaganda thing where there was Russians really tried to well in their wise wisdom to speculate on it, where there was an incident during their Ukrainian counteroffensive in the beginning of March, where like they liberated a village, and they of course decided to take a video of how they were distributing the supplies to like the starved villagers. And one grandma, unfortunately, well, she didn't get like she didn't know how to identify the soldiers, and poor thing came out with a Soviet flag towards Ukrainian soldiers, and she decided to greet them as like the Russian liberators. And well, they were like, we're actually Ukrainian, and they took the flag, and well, on the video they dumped the flag that she gave to them into the ground, and they started stomping on it because they hated the USSR.
Huh?
And well, they filmed this on video, and Russian propaganda they took it. They are placing I shit you not, they're placing monuments to the grandma all over. Like they placed a monument in Mariupol right now, and in Russian cities they place monument to this grandma
They
holding the
only
Soviet flag.
they only took her flag. They didn't shoot her.
Well, I mean, it was ambiguous because the video ended on it, and so Russians, of course, speculated that she was immediately shot. But then, of course, well, there was the long game because recently Ukrainians released a video where they took an interview with that grandma, and she said that she did it on accident, and she's now mad at Russians because they bombed her home. So like it kind of maybe backfired for the Russians.
Gotcha. Because I was thinking, like, if they shot her and then stomped on the flag, then that's an injustice that I think the Russian army would have like a fair game in propagandizing over. But if this lady came out to essentially like indicate public support for the invaders, and all that happened was her flag got stomped, that is historically a relatively lenient thing to happen after publicly declaring your support of the enemy to a group of your soldiers, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the situation would have been different if she was like a different demographic, but because she was a grandma, everyone probably thought like, ah, okay, she was old and crazy, whatever.
Right, right. Well, obviously I don't want any civilians to be hurt in any context like that. Just if all it was a flag being stolen, then okay. So you said you traveled, what was it, to Lviv?
No, 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 no. Lviv is kind of packed, and it's kind of suicide to go there because it's overflowing. It doesn't have like places people sleep on the ground and stuff like that. It's best idea. I went to like this city. How was it called? Fuck, I forgot. It's a tourist city. It has like mineral water in it that everyone usually goes to. So like it has a lot of capacity for people. It has lots of hotels. Oh
Gotcha.
yeah, I remember it. Truskavets is called. It's actually really funny. There was apparently a VGGer who lived there.
Oh,
Also came from Kiev, and well, that's like it said something about our community that we never spoke during my whole stay there because well, I didn't really seek out any context because well, I was afraid of I don't know people finding out or something like that.
well, yeah, obviously, the only group more oppressed right now than the Ukrainians is the VGG community. So when you merge those, you're going to get, a lot of tight lips. Um, well, that is funny all aside. I am okay. So you're currently back in Kiev right now, right?
Yeah, I made a questionable decision. Well, mostly it's because the draft officers in the West are kind of crazy. So I decided, well, when there was opportunity to be relatively safe in Kiev, I came back. And also
Gotcha.
because, well, I mean, it's home, and
So
also because the stay was very expensive there. So I don't know. I don't want to burn like through all of my cash staying there.
were you in Kiev at all during the offensive from Russia? Um,
Uh,
or did you
yes.
leave before it arrived in the city and arrived back after it had been defeated?
No, I left while it was ongoing. So on the third day, they actually like broke into Kiev, and there was I heard gunshots outside the window and stuff like that. I went to sleep honestly expecting to like wake up in Russia because well they were already in Kiev. But apparently So what they did is the Russian tactic includes a bunch of basically in the beginning they tried to essentially psychologically break Kiev, where they overwhelmed with attacks from all sides. They had people on all streets, and so from their perspective, it was supposed to instill an impression that Russians were everywhere and that resistance has already been broken to sort of hopefully psychologically break the defenders. And I don't know, for some reason it didn't work, and they all just got shot because they were attacking them from all sides, and there weren't that many of them, and they weren't that heavily armed. They just shoot them. Well, that's that. But of course, when you're a civilian, you don't know that, and I expected to like the city to fall. And honestly, everyone did. On the radio, everyone was talking that like uh, everyone had the vibe that they were about to die. I don't know, it was kind of sad.
Well, that's what I want to know about, what the experience was during that time. So, I obviously the drip feed of information that you're going to get as a civilian in a city being invaded is highly unreliable. I mean, you're going to hear like, oh, I hear they took this part of the city, but they actually didn't, or you're going to hear this part of the defenses are fine when they're not. Nobody really knows what's going on except for maybe not even the military. In that environment, I mean, what first of all, what was everyone doing? What was it like day to day? And how did you leave? Like through what mechanism physically? How do you leave a
Oh,
city
oh,
that's
oh,
being invaded?
those are two very different, interesting questions. So, in terms of what everyone was doing, everyone was mostly concerned about the food because, after a few days, the memes with the supply started. I'm not sure if it was because there was an actual shortage or because everyone was just buying months worth of supplies, but the bread stopped appearing, and that was basically the whole the whole grocery store was empty completely. There was like a bag of chips, like three of them. Um, and so mostly everyone was concerned with just sitting at home and then going to the grocery store. I actually we got a cold, a pretty severe one, because, I got it because I stayed for like 2 hours in freezing weather in like a grocery shop line. And after that, we went to the bomb shelter, and well, my family also got cold, and that's how we were leaving the Kiev, very ill and very not well. Um, Eventually, we mostly decided to leave because the Kiev was getting, we realized that it wasn't going to get stormed on the third day, but there was still a threat of it getting encircled and besieged. And of course, that's pretty bad. If you look at Mariupol, there are like a lot of horrific stories from there. And so eventually, my grandma didn't want to leave because, well, she's really old and leaving is not good. But eventually, she decided to go because, well, it's scary. Um, so anyway,
Do
um,
you live with your
it,
grandma?
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, she lived in like a different city, but she came to live with me because, well, there was an opportunity to buy an apartment in Kiev if we sold her apartment, and so she came here.
Gotcha. And when you left, I assume it was by train you left?
Oh, no, 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 no. That's an interesting story, actually. So at first we decided to leave by train. We bought tickets, and we didn't know back then that tickets didn't mean much because all trains were free in Kiev. Well, they're called evacuation trains, so like everyone can get on them,
Which
and
means
that's
that
the
there's no
pro.
guarantee you're going to get on, even if you have a ticket.
Yeah, so we arrived there. We took a like taxi, extremely overpriced one. It's actually very interesting because the guy who taxied us was like he basically as more and more people left, he just accumulated all the jobs in the city. So he was a medical driver, he was a taxi driver, he was driving the military around. He was basically doing everything. He had like a bunch of supplies together and like a bunch of old people he was carrying to the other place. Essentially, like
He
yeah,
became
and
the guy.
yeah, he came the guy, and basically all of it was paid by taxi, so like it was extremely overpriced on our side. But for everyone else, it was free.
Well, that's good. At least it's going towards a good cause.
Yeah. Anyway, so we had a lot of fun getting to to the train station. So the city, even still, even now, it's just full of fortifications on every corner, and it's kind of hard to get. So like you go to a crossroad, and there are a bunch of guys with AKs and lots of mines and uh, pillboxes, and you have to go to a checkpoint. They check what the fuck they're carrying, and they go see like usually like my grandma gets pass everywhere because they see like, oh, okay, it's grandma. Um, anyway, so when we got there to the train station, there were like 20,000 people there. It was the whole train station was completely packed. Uh, we were almost crushed a few times there because it was just an insane number of people.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was kind of like at the time when everyone was trying to leave.
Well, yeah. What it
And
was right after the Russians began moving into Kiev, right?
well, no, they failed to move into Kiev. They tried to like surround it, so they came from the northwest and they settled in Irpin and Bucha. And they also tried to take what's they came all the way from Sumy to essentially encircle also from the east. And so it was kind of like sassy. The only way out of the city was from the south, and well, we didn't know if it was going to be there for a while. So anyway, we didn't get on the train. Our tickets weren't worth shit, and like we tried to get on a few trains. First of all, a man couldn't get at all, and like I could not like transition in time to get on the train. So I mean, we didn't get there. Eventually, we tried to find the other channels. I tried to get through my workplace, through my uh, well, through friends of my parents and stuff like that. And eventually, like I found like our analog of Craigslist, a guy who was just carrying people out of the city on his car. It was extremely expensive, but I mean, what can you do? That's why we just got on a car and got out of the city.
Do you mind me asking how expensive it was?
I was like $700.
$700 US, like after
Yeah,
conversions?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. That is really fucking expensive. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Um, yeah. Oh,
And I
I'm
mean, keep in mind that that's Ukraine, where like the salary is something like $150. I don't remember like
right now. I think it would be difficult to calculate the actual worth of your currency, respectively. Given the whole
I
war
mean,
thing.
not really. The currency is fairly stable, mostly because, well, for a variety of reasons, because the exports are going relatively okay from Ukraine.
Yeah, and
It's
because
mostly settled,
yeah,
and
everyone
because
knows
there is a lot of like help from Western countries,
your
so
economy is
to
going to
keep up.
rebound after this, selling all the scrap from the Russian vehicles that your tractors have liberated.
Oh, I mean that's a political question. I don't want to go into that right now,
No,
but
no, no.
I know how much your country is going to recover.
I'm kidding. We salute the hard work of your tractor division.
I mean,
it-
yeah, actually, we got like the Moskva cruiser. There are like photos of it staying in Mykolaiv right now. The tractors, the underwater tractors, got them.
yeah, it's pretty fucking wild. Um, it reminds me a little bit of those. Obviously Ukraine is like a developed country. But in Afghanistan, you'd have those like we drone strike these areas, and they would like sell the scrap metal from the missiles that were used and like benefit from it if nobody got hit or whatever. And you like this is like that times 1,000 because there are like fully functional like multi-rocket launch systems being captured. So I mean, it's probably go for a pretty
Well, I mean,
penny.
kind of like it would be good if like they were Ukrainians were allowed to keep them. There are like videos where Ukrainian got hit with a missile in his backyard, and like the emergency services came in to extract it, and he was like, "Please no, I need it." And like, why the fuck would you need a missile? And like, I need it. And that's the video I ends on that. Essentially, like the people from the government coming to pick all the trash up, and so a lot of people can't really benefit from it.
Gotcha.
economically. Well, because if you have a tank, it's probably better in the hands of the military, you know.
Probably, yeah. You know, I don't think, all respect to Ukrainian farmers, I don't know if they necessarily have the training to single-handedly do the work of like a four-man tank crew, or produce the
They do.
ammunition that
At
it
least
uses.
driving is fairly easy. I mean, so like for example, a lot of captured vehicles are so-called MTLB, and it's just a tractor, but it's a farmer to carry. Its task is mostly it does mostly the same thing as the tractor, so like carry heavy equipment, but it's a military vehicle. So like for a lot of people, it's like okay, I got second tractor, yay.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I mean, I think driving a tank, yeah, driving a tank's a one-person job for the most part, I think. It's all the reloading, sighting, and aiming and firing, I think, that requires some coordination. Anyway, you know, it's largely tangential.
Yeah, sorry for stomaching.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to know more. So you've interacted with people a good bit over the course of these recent events. And how much of I guess how much of man's inhumanity to man have you seen? The news that we get, you know, as Americans from Ukraine is pretty much and just an overwhelming cavalcade of pro-Ukrainian propaganda, which I'm fine with and agree with. But obviously, in the context of wartime, people, through desperation, are going to be driven to some pretty bad places. And I want to know, like, in terms of your experience with the people around you, I mean, how many people have you seen act in I guess what I'm trying to say is, how much has this conflict changed your perception of the moral worth of an average person, you know?
I mean, it didn't. It mostly improved because, like, I expected. I read a lot about Yugoslav wars, and like I expected the worst, to be honest.
Hmm.
So, like, the fact that it didn't go to like a mutual genocide yet completely is honestly impressive on both sides, to be honest.
Okay. Okay, I'm happy to
Uh,
hear that, you know. Because you know so often, like, I don't know, and maybe you couldn't even share if you did know, but like stories of like people fighting over scraps of food or tearing each other apart over perceived accusations of disloyalty. You're in an environment right now where even good people are going to be driven to bad behavior. So I guess I just wondered to what extent you feel you've seen that.
there was a very interesting incident, a little bit bonkers, where we were standing in line for. In the West, the government is giving assistance. It's not much to like people who were resettled every month, and so
Hmm.
we are trying to get like documents to get that approved. And there was a huge line there, and like people are standing, and apparently I see just one girl like pushes another woman, and then something happens, and then she just decks her for some reason. And then like a lot of guys went in and started to like, what the fuck happened? And the woman accuses this girl of like trying to take pictures of her documents, and then everyone was really sussed about it. They stopped her, decided asking her questions like, well, why the fuck were you doing that? And she was really uh, didn't really act normal. Like she just, I don't know, maybe she was like very socially awkward, but she didn't answer any questions. Or like, well, why were you taking pictures? Did you take pictures? She didn't answer anything. Eventually, like someone called the Secret Service, and like she was disappeared basically.
Oh, Jesus. Well, I hope she's okay. Um,
Yeah, I hope too, but maybe she was doing something dumb. Essentially, the suspicion was that she was trying to forge documents to essentially help Russian spies get into the country. So I don't know. I'm
gotcha.
not qualified to like pass judgment on that, but
Right,
maybe.
that's very much a you have to know type situation. Um my 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 understanding from the incredibly small amount of information I have is that the Ukrainian Secret Service has been acting the way you would expect it to, given the fact that the country is being invaded, but not out of line of a kind of expected range of moral behavior. What I mean to say is that if people suspected of being spies are being like just arrested without a warrant and being kept in detainment, that's kind of in line with what you'd expect a country facing a total invasion to like take place. But I haven't heard people saying stuff like, I suspect they're being rounded up and shot, which would be well beyond like the acceptable range of behavior. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah, I
acceptable
know.
allowances here.
Well, something that I think a lot of people like don't get about Secret Service is that oftentimes they so for example that was the case in like the USSR in like later years. A lot of times they don't really have to like do any of the nasty stuff because they mostly rely on like the implication. Um, that is one thing, and the other thing is that well, because Zelensky's government has complete control over like the parliament, they can just pass whatever laws they want, especially because it's like martial law. So usually, like they don't arrest you without a warrant. They have the warrant, they have the laws, they have the legal grounds to do everything because well, they can just write laws.
Right, they can do
Um,
whatever they want.
uh, yeah, so like I haven't seen like any cases of like the Moncaest shit, like you say, they're shooting people. And but the thing is, like obviously, like if you heard about it, then they would be bad Secret Service because well, what's the point of the secret?
Of course, we'll find out more later if we ever do, you know. There are there are deviations from proper democratic behavior that I think are acceptable during wartime and those that I think aren't. If your country's like Ukraine being invaded by Russia, I expect martial law. I expect like essentially the temporary suspension of a bunch of democratic activities. That all makes sense. It's, you know, an invasion from Russia. If they were rounding up and shooting people, I wouldn't expect that. So hopefully it turns out not to be the case. I imagine a lot of people are going... there's going to be like a really big moral reckoning after this conflict is over, assuming Ukraine wins, with like what happened, what Ukraine had to do to not lose, you know?
I have to like mention something very interesting that I don't think a lot of people get is that like there is a an ongoing like conflict. Well, not only between Zelensky and like pro-Russian forces that like he's maybe trying to like use his power to remove, um, but also with the previously like far-right Ukrainian nationalist government and Zelensky, because obviously, well, it's a conflict about power, obviously. So, for example, the previous power government of Poroshenko was the guy. They are obviously trying to undermine Zelensky's power, and so they're using their media machine to spread like narratives that, for example, that the essentially stab in the back. If you remember like this from like history lessons, that you know the liberal government of Zelensky is like not doing enough for the soldiers and stuff like that. The soldiers are being betrayed and stuff like that. And Zelensky responded by shutting down their media channels. Apparently, you can do that.
Mhm.
Um, and before that, Zelensky tried to jail the previous president, who was like a essentially he positioned himself as like the Ukrainian nationalist who would fight against Russia. And Zelensky charged him with essentially with working with Russia. So I don't know how that works. But I mean, the court will decide. For now, like he's just like the court is going. It's going because it's a democratic process. It's going to go for like 5 years or something. But it's going.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the reckoning isn't too difficult, you know. Um Honestly, the fact that no, I guess I'm heartened by what you have to say, you know. Um I can imagine a much more miserable set of experiences with regards to like how people are treating each other in the context of wartime. You know, I'm glad that at least for now, uh, it it hasn't degraded to that point. So,
Oh, and something I have to say is that
mhm,
obviously, as a Marxist, like something that a salient critique that like from like I had from Russian leftists is that in wartime, obviously, like there will be a bourgeois state will have um, a different set of standards for the behavior of well the people who own the means of production and the people who don't. So, for example, we had recently, like a wartime, passed new what are the labor laws? Yes, that are very very fun.
mhm,
So, like I don't know, it's like insane. It's like 10-hour workday, no holidays, can fire anyone anytime, no unions, no strikes allowed, and stuff like that. Well,
When was this
essentially
passed?
everything. Well, it's active while martial law is active, as far as I know. Though there are some concerns that it will remain after the war.
That's interesting. Is it actually baked into the preconditions for martial law? So, like, in addition to, so it's actually like a part of the legal code for martial law, this extended work hour.
Unfortunately, I'm not like a legal expert to know enough, but from what I've heard, I think it is. But I've heard conflicted sources on
That
this.
is very interesting. Well, even if it's not directly like legally linked, that's still very interesting. And I think that is indicative. Like if you look at the if you look at what a martial, like the passage of martial law is meant to achieve, like its actual legal and social goals, it makes sense that the mandated labor would be essentially right in line with that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a really good critique that I hear from Marxists is that there is a double standard because on one hand, yes, during wartime, labor is expected to work. It's understandable, but on the other time, the same sets of standards aren't placed on the um, on the bourgeois because they don't have to maintain labor. They can just destroy their enterprise if they don't think it's profitable, and even if it's needed for the war effort. I've seen cases where just people essentially would steal the salaries for like 5 months that they were meant to keep and to take it all and then fire everyone and then just walk out with like 10 million something.
Jesus. Wow, that is incredibly fucked. And yeah, that makes sense. Logically you would think that during martial law, the people whose participation you would most need to compel would be the ultra powerful and wealthy, because they're the ones who have the most resources to commit towards the war effort. But evidently not. They get to skip out.
Yeah, they get to skip out because they control the media.
Yeah, it's no legal consequences. That is that is expected and still very disappointing. What have your hours been like? Have you continued to work, or has your workplace been destroyed, or otherwise you've been put off?
Oh, I worked in I got really lucky. I worked in a decent company, and like we all work. We have been working for like 2 years in remote mode right now. Because most of my team that I work with is like from Russia, which is interesting.
Really?
But
What do you do?
uh,
Tech work?
I'm a software engineer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense then.
Yeah, and so our company is really nice. They were just like, oh yeah, we got this new labor code. We don't care about it. We just maintain the old rules, and like everyone gets like the same holidays they used to have.
Oh well, that's actually really nice. I'm glad that your workplace has treated you well.
Yeah, they actually were really really nice because they also paid for like most of the rent when I went outside Kiev. Um, they just did it, and then they just also just gave a bunch of cash to like well help maintain people who had to be displaced for the time being.
Huh. They
But
must
then of
really
course
value your
eventually they
labor.
stopped doing it because well after a month you can't do this forever.
Right, right. Of course, they can't be maintained forever, but still, that's nice. In another bout of unexpected but pleasant generosity on the part of employers, apparently Tesla, and we should never take them at their word for this, but at least nominally, claims that they will pay for their employees who need an abortion for their travel and accommodations traveling to a blue state to get an abortion if they can't get one in the state that they're in. It's only a little related. It's just interesting. I saw that earlier today. So hopefully they actually
Well,
fall for me.
it's just another way in which Ukraine is better than the US, of course.
Of course,
Abortion is
naturally,
legal here.
Slava Ukraini.
Yeah.
When you how recently did you get back to Ukraine?
I never left Ukraine.
Oh, sorry, my
I
bad.
came.
Not Ukraine, Kiev. My bad.
Actually, I have to like shout out to all the VGGers who offered me like stay in different European countries.
Oh,
I'm
fuck
really
yeah.
thankful, but I mean, they it wasn't really necessary in the end. I came back on like 5th of April, I think. Yeah,
5th of April. 5th
I've
of...
been for a month here
Wait, is it
now.
May? Is it May now?
Yeah, it's May. The work has been going for like I think 73 days
I
now.
can't believe it's May
Same.
now. Oh my god. Okay, gotcha. So you've been in for a while. Has the public mood shifted at all with
Um,
regards to the war?
yeah, obviously it shifts all the time, and like our psychologist on the radio always informs us how the mood shifts and what to expect. But at this point, like as the war drags on, and it's basically like holy shit, it's like the eternal war now. It's like World War One. Every time, like 1,000 people died, and like nothing is achieved. So of course, everyone is basically among civilians. Everyone is just tired and that's it. Everyone just goes on the day how they can. Um, at the beginning, there were a lot of mood swings, basically from like complete euphoria and like expecting a victory in a day soon to like complete depression and expecting finding enemies and traitors everywhere. And, I mean, it shifts. Right now, it's just kind of permanently stuck in this tired state, and unless something changes.
Would you, because over, at least over here from the news we get, at least from the perception that I've seen, the attitude is pretty optimistic about the war. The impression that I feel we've gotten is that Russia keeps receding its goals time and time again, to the point now where they're essentially just moving to the Donbass region and like the land bridge they want to Crimea. And that apart from that, like they've withdrawn their effort at trying to hold any territory beyond that. Of course, I believe it was just yesterday that another one of their ships in the Azov Sea got lamowed by a Ukrainian
It's the
missile.
Black Sea. It's the Black Sea. As of sea is very shallow. I'm not even sure that the ship could enter there.
Black Sea, the Black Sea.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, yeah, the news is very optimistic. The problem is like as the war goes on for like forever, it doesn't matter how well the thing is going. People are going to get tired because,
Mhm.
of course, like about like I think like 45% of people are unemployed and like everyone is just waiting for it to end. So I mean, it's essentially like no matter how optimistic the war, civilians don't have the mental training to last forever. That's just the nature of things.
Mhm.
Soldiers get trained for that, but we aren't that. So.
That makes sense, yeah. And no amount, civilian morale is very important for these war efforts, but it can only be maintained for so long, um, in the face of a conflict like this. Especially since, as the Ukrainian forces continue to march out from Kiev and recapture areas that Russia has left, you're going to get more Bucha situations, which I imagine is miserable for morale.
It's Bucha.
Bucha, thank you.
Anyway, yeah. Anyway, I mean, it doesn't really work for morale like that. I really don't think so because most of it makes people angry. But anyway, the thing is like, uh, oh yeah, there was like an interesting thing because I came back from the west on a train, and it was mostly an empty train for obvious reasons because like why the fuck would we go to Kiev? And
Mhm.
apparently, one of the reasons why you go to Kiev is if you were a soldier on a leave and you were going to take part in the Donbas offensive. I had like the most secure train in the world. Essentially, my cabin had like two massive, just hulking soldiers protecting us.
Ah, sweet.
It was
Yeah, that's the real way to stay safe. Travel towards the front line. Um,
I mean, yeah,
you'll
obviously
always
you're
be
gonna travel
safe.
together with a lot of soldiers, so obviously you'll say, yeah.
Well, I mean, if it works, it works. Um, it's oh god. Well, I do hope the conflict ends soon. At the rate
It's
Russia,
unlikely.
oh, it's unlikely. At the rate Russia has been receding its, stated goals, though, maybe we can hope that by like 3 months from now, they're saying like, the operation hasn't been a failure. We just want to protect this one sand pit. in the Donbass
Oh,
region
we want
from
to protect Moscow. Yes, 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 obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. You know, our goal was always the defense of the Russian homeland. They just clamber across the border.
uh,
We can hope.
y- yeah. Are you familiar with the progress of the peace talks, by the way? I haven't seen you report on that anyway.
I've been following them a little bit, but my political engagement over the past few days has been spotty at best.
Yeah, so essentially, like the peace talk started on like the third day, which is like always an indication that your invasion is going well.
Hmm.
Anyway, and so they've been going back and forth until like I think after right before the the retreat from the north, they were achieved in Istanbul, so-called Istanbul Accords. Basically, like the Ukraine put forth a how do I put it, a peace proposition that accounted for Russian demands essentially. Um, so what Ukraine proposed is that Russia returns right now to the borders before the war, and then like the solution for like the Ukrainian regions is reached diplomatically. Essentially, Ukraine still doesn't recognize um, that those regions are Russian, but they don't like try to capture them, and then everyone gets to talk. And also, like they accounted for Russian demands. One of the Russian demands was neutrality, and Ukraine agreed to that. So, like, no NATO. But you know, you've seen the meme, I assume, where it's like, what if we made like an alliance that included all the nations of NATO and Ukraine, but it wasn't called NATO? Well, essentially, like I quote like the Ukrainian foreign ministry. They said like we're making a bigger, better NATO with an Article 5 on steroids, and so they're trying to like get everyone on board.
Well, fuck yeah.
Apparently, apparently they are talking with China to guarantee Ukrainian, essentially to provide Article 5 to Ukraine, which would be
No
very funny.
shot. No shot China would do that. Why would they do that? That would
I
be,
mean, for the cloud, I mean, essentially, if Ukraine is guaranteed for with like 5 nuclear states, then like, I mean, why not? You know,
no, no,
you get
hell,
to say that you're preserving the peace and like stuff like that. Like, you're not like actually going to get into a nuclear war anytime. So like, why not?
I would hope not. Yeah, no, that sounds funny as fuck. Having,
Even funnier is that Ukraine invited Russia to be the guarantee of independence of Ukraine, which is okay.
huh. Yeah, well, I mean, a diplomatic solution has always been the resolution to this war. Russia's economy is already basically kaput. So at this point, like, the war continues for as long as Russia wants it to continue, because they're always going to have enough, like, 18-year-old, 18-year, one-day-old, recruits with, you know, like, cheaply made guns with no optics to throw across the border. And Russia just needs to be properly incentivized to stop. So if some bullshit diplomatic resolution is what ends the war, I mean, obviously I would support that.
Yeah, essentially, I was very hopeful, but it just seems to the Istanbul Accords seem like more distant with every day. Initially, I was hoping that like Russia hoped to essentially the idea was that, oh, a diplomatic solution is reached on the Donbas, but it wasn't clear what the status would be. So, like, how much autonomy would be granted after the war. And so, what I was hoping is that with this offensive, Russia was trying to essentially gain leverage for the eventual peace deal. But apparently, that just doesn't seem to be the case. So, like, they are trying to like take Odessa and stuff like that, which is very funny, but also not good when it comes to like reaching peace.
Yeah, probably not. Well, I wonder how much it would really hurt Ukraine not to lose the Donbass, but the part of the Donbass that's been held by Russian separatist forces for the past 8 years. That there is black soil in that region, right? Obviously, they would want to keep it. I just wonder, because even after the war ends, assuming Ukraine takes back all of their land, like Putin would probably just keep funding Russian separatist groups in that part of the Donbass, like forever. So, yeah, I don't know. It seems like a really difficult situation in terms of resolution. I don't know how you could ever I don't know how you could ever fix that permanently. So, yeah, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, I have not single-handedly solved the Russia-Ukraine conflict yet. Are you...
I'm sorry. I got invaded by Babushka, and she asked me to to have breakfast. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to talk for much
That's
longer.
quite all right. I really do appreciate you coming on. I imagine in a little while, after more has developed, we could get some updates from you.
I mean, maybe, but I'll also like I've been posting a lot about the war because mostly because I was a refugee and like I didn't have much to do.
Hmm.
Normally, I'm very busy, so like I have my work and I'm also working to get a PhD thesis written. So like I don't know.
I
I'm
understand.
not gonna be like a political actor or something like that.
Of
More
course.
like a streamer.
What matters most is that you remain a VGG chatter. I really appreciate you coming on, seriously. Please stay safe and enjoy your breakfast.
Oh, thank you very much. You two have like a nice stream. I don't know.
Take care.
By the way, I see like the title about the sleep schedule. I just
Uh-huh.
have to like vent that I had a horrible sleep today because I shit you not, I had three they call it three air raids during the night, and I was woken 3 times,
Jesus,
which
I'm
is
sorry. That fucking sucks.
yeah. Every time I have to go to the bathroom to like because thank God for like Ukrainian housing because we have really thick walls, but so where you can hide, but like it's very annoying.
Well, let's hope those air raid sirens prove unnecessary and you don't catch a ruined ceiling anytime soon. You have a good breakfast, okay?
Yeah, you too. Whatever dinner or whatever.
Be well.
Be well too. Bye.
That was nice. Horesmi on Twitter, if you all want to follow, by the way, which I have.